My name is Casey Staloch. Today we're going to talk about how I personally raised 80 bushel soybeans using Viking conventional beans. It was a good feeling because I've never had 80 bushel beans before, and I mean we've been trying for, this is what, my 7th year of farming, and so we've definitely been trying, and so we've been trying different strategies, different things, but it takes a while. We kept getting closer, and now we're finally hitting it pretty consistently. The farm that we're going to talk about today was in Freeborn County, just north of Freeborn, Minnesota is where the farm we're actually talking about. The variety we used was Viking 2418, and we're going to talk a little bit about from start to finish what we did and kind of how we got there and go from there. When I first started farming, a lot of the yields that they were pulling off of the farms on soybeans were 45 to 55 bushel soybeans, pretty consistent. Since we started, our first year getting our liming and stuff done, and when I wrote the check for lime the first year that I farmed, my wife wanted to leave me. So, but I just said, if we don't do this now, we're just going to keep throwing money at it and not getting anything. But now that we've been doing that, we've been consistently in the 70s, the last few years. And like I say, when we first started we were in the 60s, now we've gotten to 70s, now we're getting to 80s. It's just been a kind of a stepping stone type deal, and this year I will say was a really good year for soybeans. I haven't heard a lot of 80 bushel averages in our area. I've had some guys that said they have on certain farms, but again, ours is all across the scale tickets. We don't have to store anything or whatever. But yeah, so our yields have kept tricking up. Again, on the corn, when we first got the fields on the corn, they were in that 190 to 200 bushel range on the corn side is what the previous owner was getting. And now, we're in that, well, the one year we had a 250 average across the whole farm. This year wasn't quite as good as that. We were kind of more in that 230s average, and we're using these same products on our corn, giving it what it needs, and you can't argue with that. Previous crop on this particular piece was corn. We disc ripped it with a John Deere 2700 ripper last fall. This spring we came in, we used Boundary and Authority first for the Preemergent chemical. We worked that in one time, just once with a field cultivator, and we planted the beans. The date we planted was May the 2nd, and after that we cultivated it once, and then we cultivated around the outside again, but we never used the post spray, and it was our cleanest field that we had, which was crazy because usually on conventional beans you're out there spraying quite a bit. We didn't have to do a post spray on these beans, which typically, that very rarely ever happens. All my other farms I had to. So I don't know if that had something to do with keeping the beans going, not really stunting them. But on my other farms we had, really good yields too, in that same 80 range. Look at your soil samples. The biggest thing you want to focus on is getting your pHs corrected first. If we don't have our pHs corrected, it doesn't matter what you put out there, it's not going to be available, anything on a dry level. So pH, calcium, focus on that first. I don't care how you get that corrected, but that's the first thing we want to get corrected, is the pH, your liming, so on and so forth. Once that is good, soybeans don't like wet feet. So, we want to look at the drainage, what's going on with the drainage. And some of these products are definitely going to help open up your soil a little bit, get a little more porosity. So those are the keys first. Once we get those done and we get a soil sample, now we're set. Now we can build from there. But if we don't have those key building blocks first, there's no point in really trying to push the yields, because you have to have that stuff first. And no matter how you do it, no matter where you get your lime, no matter where you get your calcium source, however you're adjusting your pH, whether you got to bring your pH down with some elemental sulfur or you got to bring your pH up with some calcium, that's where we want to get in that mid-range, and those 6s, you know, low 7s is kind of where we want to be for the pHs. We did a grid sample first, so we kind of knew where we were and what we needed. And kind of how we got there was through all the foliar feeding. We didn't put any dry products down at all. I usually do. We didn't on this one just because we were running into a time deal. And then the other thing is tissue testing. I always like to do tissue testing to know what's the plant craving. Instead of just putting something out there random, what does the plant want? What is it not getting into it? All the products behind me here are developed so they're plant available right now. You spray it on, they're going to be in that plant within minutes instead of days or having to go through reactions in the soil to become available. So get that, I know what it needs, I put it on, plant's loving it, I'm loving it, we're getting additional growth, we're shortening the nodes, and then we're filling out our pods. You know, we're not having the pod abortion, we're not having the flower abortion or the seed abortion that typically a lot of guys see. And what that is, what we found in all of our research is you look at your manganese, your copper, and your iron, those are the big ones, and zinc of why you're having seed abortion or pod abortion. The argument against tissue testing is they say, well, it's not 100% accurate. I agree with that 100%. It's a picture, it's a snapshot in time. It's all it is. So I'm not saying that's all you look at. You know, we've got our soil samples, we can see, and we got our tissue samples that we look at. The biggest resistance I get from guys is, oh, I don't want to take the time to do it. It's expensive, you know, is it going to be as accurate, you know? But like I say, you don't have to do as extensive as you do on your soil test. You got a problem area, go out there, take a tissue sample, see what's going on, then take a sample out of a good area, look at the difference, what is it? You know, so it's it's not like you're doing grid sampling or something like you would on your soil samples. And it's usually during times in the summer where guys don't want to do it. But I think it's very important, you know, just to kind of get an idea of, hey, this is what I got in my soil, this is what I'm getting up into my tissue, how can I fix that if I need to? A lot of the products that we've tried in the past are typically EDTA products, which is common out in the marketplace. And those are fine in furrow, but anytime you're putting them with chemistry or as a foliar feed, they're just not available, not very efficient. They are going to be cheaper most of the time. Picking varieties, sometimes I get a choice, sometimes I don't, because I raise seed beans for Viking. But typically I can say, hey, if I have one that I don't like, next year I'll say, hey, I don't want to grow that anymore. So two of the big beans that I've been raising have been the 2155s, which have been really good, probably one of my best beans since I started farming. And then we got into this 2418, and the 2418 I really like. I just think it's a 2-4, so it's got a little bit more top end than a 2155, I believe. It just seems like a more even bean. It gets up, really good emergence. You know, I used to work for different seed companies where I would see, we would bring an ISO line in, we'd put traits on it. The traits usually came in at a lower yield, and so I'm asking myself, why are we paying more money for traits when we're getting less out of it? And a lot of the problems that we're seeing why guys want to go with traits are typically nutritional problems, monoculture, different things like that. The other thing why I chose to go conventional on my farm is I think you have better food quality down the road. You know, just some less issues. There's studies out there. I mean, you can dig studies all day long and look, but that's so. Not only is it a personal belief of mine on the conventional side, but it's also by doing some research and seeing, you know, your nutrient content, you know, storability, life of the product type deal. That's why we've chose to go non-GMO on our farm. And non-GMO for us is a big cost savings up front because we're not paying the high tech fees. And like I say, we're rotated. I've had corn on some of my farms for 4 or 5 years in a row, no insecticide. And again, that's not for everybody because there's going to be some train wrecks out there, but once you get your soil working for you, it's an extra hired guy more or less because it'll take care of you. And the leaves on those, like I say, on the non-GMO, what I've noticed versus the GMO, the leaves are just so much bigger. And so I think on the foliar side, we actually, we got a bigger target to hit. And I just think that every time you're putting something into a bean or even on the corn side, you have to take something out. And so I think you're giving up, whatever it may be. But I just think that this way here, it seems like the non-GMO take less energy, take less water. They seem to mature faster. Well, AgriGuardian's been in business for 15 years now. They sell worldwide, so we're in all the states and in different countries. The biggest thing that we've noticed with our clients is we're using less, but we're getting more. We've done all of our testing through USDA, university systems, so it's not like we're going to get a test off of my farm and publish it. That's not how it is. Also, we have letters from the USDA stating that you can tank mix our stuff with Roundup, which I don't use, but we have that. You can tank mix it with Roundup, Liberty, any of that, and we've got documentation for that as well. So on the inoculants, there's 2 different forms you can do. You can do one through a commercial treater on your soybean seed, or we have one where you can actually do it in your planter box as you're planting. We typically go with the commercial on the Marauder side of things, and that a lot of companies will have that in with their full package. Very, very inexpensive to use. The planter box one, a lot of guys like doing that so they don't have to treat their beans in case they run into weather and have to take back, So as long as the package isn't open or whatever, or the beans aren't treated, then that's easy to do then. So on the Graph XSA here, this is one that you can put on in the planter box. So you can just sprinkle it on as you're putting the seed in through your seed tender or whatever. You're going to put that on at planting. Marauder is one that you would inoculate through a commercial treater. So when the beans come treated to you, wherever you're getting them treated, they would be putting that on at that point in time. It's good for up to 120 days, and I'll mention the Marauder and the Graph XSA are both ABM products, which you can get through the seed house, or you can look at abmfirst.com. So I like to start with that. I planted my soybeans on May the 2nd. I planted them at 160,000 seeds per acre. Just a John Deere Centerfill 1775, Promax 40 discs. Nothing beyond the realm, nothing beyond anything expensive. It's just kind of what come with the stock. And then after that, once the beans got up, we start hitting them about the 3rd trifoliate with our first shot of foliar feeding. And in our soil maps, I knew we were low in sulfur. I knew we were low in sulfur. I knew we had some issues with certain spots with organic matter. So some of the first products that I started to look at was the Humic that we used, and that's just a humic acid, and we put that down at 2 gallons to the acre over the top, and every time we were out spraying with that, we're using a minimum of 20 gallons of spray solution total, so we get a good coverage. Humic we get that out of a company called Humic Growth Solutions out of Jacksonville, Florida. The humic acid we can put on, you can do that on the soil, or you can put it on as a foliar too, but we want to do it earlier. It is OMRI listed, so you can use it on organic as well. As some of these other products, we do have OMRI certification on different forms of these other products as well. And that one you can put on as a dry so many pounds, or what we do is we bring it in, we put it through our machine, make it into a liquid so you can run it through your sprayer. Along with that, at that third trifoliate, I'm putting in the AgriGuardian Molly product. And what that does is that helps with your nodulization, nitrogen fixation. Molly was our first product as of AgriGuardian that we come out with. The biggest problem is when we look at tissue samples and everything, going back on that, you want to make sure you have all your micros. Molly or molybdenum is an essential plant nutrient, so we want to make sure that's on our tissue test. It's associated with nitrogen. So on the soybeans, it's going to help with nodulization, nitrogen fixation. On corn, it's going to help bringing nitrate back to ammonia form. And so on the corn, like I say, you bring up ammonia, stores in the plant, but that's a free radical, so it can only be there for 7 to 10 days. Then it's got to store it as nitrate. A cheap, dirty way to find out if you got good nodulization is when you pull the bean plant out, squeeze the nodule. If the nodule, after introduced to the air, turns red, you should have sufficient moly in your nodules. If it turns more of a brown or a green, you're going to want to use some of this product to help get it going faster and get those nodules up and running. The other thing that I like to put in every time I'm out there is a micronutrient package. And this one here by AgriGuardian, you can tank mix with any of your herbicides, any of this stuff up here, so you have no special pass. Very, very inexpensive. Micromix, this is kind of AgriGuardian's flagship product. It's probably on the most acres out of any of our products. This one you can tank mix with Roundup, Liberty, and we should have our Enlist label here come spring. And what this is it's a complete mix of micronutrients. You got iron, manganese, boron, copper, zinc, molybdenum. Those are the main ones. So it's in a usable form, so we can get it in. Like I say, we have research that shows it getting into the plant within 90 seconds. And it's a proprietary chelating agent in there, which does that and which all of our products contain. So I guess the other thing with micromix or micronutrients, so to speak, would be that's where a lot of your plant health, you're going to need, for all your macros to work, you're going to have your micros in line with that. So each macro is more or less paired up with a micro, and you have to have the different ratios and have them both available for each other for them all to work efficiently. And so, like, for example, if you look at on some of your micronutrients, some of those deficiencies can look like nitrogen deficiency, so to speak. So that's why we do the tissue testing, because if you look at something and say, oh, it's nitrogen deficient, okay, we go put on more nitrogen. The plant didn't really do anything. Why? Well, maybe it was molybdenum deficiency. Molybdenum and nitrogen deficiency look identical. I always like to call it the moron effect, where guys think, oh, if I just put more fertilizer on, moron. Well, that's what we're doing. We're creating imbalances. So again, once we get our soils where we kind of want them with the pH, and get our calcium ratios where we want them, which cal to mag ratios, you want 7 to 1, maybe even 10 to 1. On your base saturation, you want your calcium a minimum, you know, some guys say 2, I like to say 3 to 5 for your percent base saturation on potassium. The first pass that we're doing, like I mentioned before, was third trifoliate, so beans are real small. And guys go, well, what date did you do it? What date did you do it? Well, just when they're at that stage. We want to make sure there's some foliage out there to get it on. And if any of this stuff hits the soil, we're fine. I mean, it's still going to be active in the soil. I also like to throw in a biostimulant when I'm out there as well. It's a root stimulant. You know, it's going to trigger a lot of different processes in the plant that'll get it up and going. It kind of shortens the distance between the nodes on the beans. It's going to help you prevent pod abortion, seed abortion, so on and so forth. You're going to have a lot healthier plant. So foliar blend, this product, the original product's been around since the 70s. We do have organic versions of this one as well. This is a very, very versatile product. It's got like your growth regulators and different things in there, your PGRs. Also got a little bit of humic, a little bit of fulvic. The foliar blend, there's also a product in there called salicylic acid, which helps trigger the plant's natural defense system. You got root stimulants. You can use this as in furrow. We have a form of it that can go in furrow on corn. We have a form of it where you can treat wheat, corn, alfalfa, beans, and then we have the foliar side of it, which we use quite substantially, a lot of. The other thing, when guys are putting on fungicide, that's when I like to put that on, because it just helps with the plant health, and we see some very similar responses with that, and then you're not using the harsh fungicides killing off the beneficials. This would be a good alternative, yes, and it's going to be more ecologically friendly for your because, like I say, you're not taking out all your beneficial fungus and everything like that, where the fungicides are not, they're not targeting just one, they're targeting everything. When I talk that I don't use fungicide, the reason that I don't use fungicide is I don't feel I have to, because we already have the plant health there. And how you get the plant health is through higher levels of nutrients, higher levels of micronutrients. And that's typically what fungicides are in disguise, are more or less a iron molecule is usually typically the base of the fungicides. So when we're using our products and we have a healthy plant all year long, we don't have to come back in and give it some aspirin at the end of the year and say, well, sorry, you weren't performing the whole year like you should have been, but here's a little band-aid, and kind of greens it up, and guys think that they're really doing something. Yeah, they're showing some adding yields, but all that's saying is you weren't sufficient during the year. That's why you're seeing a benefit. I've tried fungicides in the past. I have not seen a benefit on mine, just because I think we're using such higher rates of fertility and plant available fertility. The new product that we've kind of just brought in now in the last year or two here is our Nutriboost product, which is a sulfur, magnesium, and potassium product. Every test we look at on soil, we're always high in magnesium. But pretty much every test we look at on the tissue test, we are low in magnesium, so it's not getting into the plant. So we came up with the Nutriboost product, which has given it a shot of magnesium. And those three nutrients together, the potassium, the magnesium, and the sulfur, those three are needed in massive forms in the plant prior, during, and right after going into reproductive stage. So we put that in there to make sure that we've got enough of those nutrients at that time to really jump it into reproductive stage. So Nutriboost is one of the newer products in our lineup. Like I say, it's a 00636, so 6 potassium, 3 magnesium, 6 sulfur. And again, when you're getting into reproductive stage, those 3 nutrients are what the plant needs a lot of, and typically it's not getting enough out of the soil. It can't bring them up fast enough, so we're giving it a boost, hence the Nutriboost, of those nutrients to help get it into reproductive stage. And we've had tremendous response on this. We've had a lot of guys, in Iowa, in Nebraska. We've tested it down in Florida. And so last year was kind of our first launch year, so to speak, with this product, total launch. And we've seen anywhere, I've had guys call me and they say, hey, we had 19 bushel increase on corn. Wow. We've had guys say, geez, look at the size of my leaves on the beans. And like I say, I think this is going to be one of the next big things, because we didn't really have, there's other products out there that are dry, they're hard to mix. So this one's 100% liquid. You can tank mix it with about anything. And usually what I do is I'll split these up. I'll put these on each time that I'm out there. But then later in the season, then we're looking at, more of this here along with this stuff as we go through the season. But this one here we don't do until we have pretty good foliage on. With the Marauder and stuff, you're talking, like 4 something unit to treat. Here you're talking, 4 something a gallon, so you're going to be under $10 for this one. Here you're talking $2.75 per application. So we do that twice. One here you're talking about $5 an application. We do that twice. So the foliar blend, which is our biostimulant, you know, we're using that. That's about $5 an application. We're using that twice as well. And then the Nutriboost is around $10 a gallon, and we're putting on a whole gallon of that. So if you want to do it when the beans are smaller, you can go with a half a gallon. You want to do it when the beans are bigger, that R1 time frame where your pod is starting to elongate but not fill yet, then we can go with a gallon because we got plenty of foliage. And remember, the key to foliar feeding, the more water the better. I like to go a minimum of 20 gallons of water per spray solution. So total, when you total all this up, you know, you're probably going to be in that $30, $40 range additional than the typical program. But like I say, we've been seeing, you know, so $40 right now. I think we got what, $9 beans, $10 beans. You need 4 bushel to make that pay. Not only that, I don't use fungicides at all, so there's a savings there. I just don't think that all that's doing is, you know, bringing a slingshot to a gunfight. You know, you're just putting a Band-Aid on something. You're not really, you know, you're covering up some of the mistakes that we made earlier in the season. With this here, we have full season plant health. You know, we're going to have better test weight. We're going to have, on the seed side of things, we've noticed better germination. Like I said, I use Boundary and Authority First Down, and it's a little bit more expensive, but you're not paying a tech fee up front. And just visiting with a guy this morning that I sold some beans to, you know, there's premiums available on non-GMO soybeans, so that's going to help offset that. And there's different premiums, whether you're going food grade or just non-GMO regular. You know, so you're going to want to call around, and CHS is one I know will give premiums on it. I know Pipeline, Purist Protein, there's a whole bunch of them, and I think AL Seed website, there's different buyers and whatever to look. And that's the other thing too, if you're looking at a non-GMO premium, find out what bean they want. Do they want a clear hilum? Does it matter if it's a dark hilum or not? You know, those are questions that you're going to want to ask before you plant them. And then when you get to harvest and they say, no, we can't have those, we got to have this, or, you know, you want to make sure you're on the right track there. Post-emergence, we didn't do any on this field, but on all my other fields I had to. And typically what I go with on my posts is I like using a Warrant Ultra. It doesn't seem to ding them as bad as, say, like a Flex Star, you know, or a Cobra or something like that. It does have some residual. On the grass, I just use a Select, you know, just or a generic grass killer. But typically, and again, on the weed control, you get your calciums up there, you get your fertility up there, you will have, you know, less weeds. Now, we've been fighting giant rag forever, and I think we're starting to get a handle on that a little bit better, but that's probably been my biggest weakness, you know, on the non-GMO soybeans is, you know, you get some patches that'll get out of hand, or, you know, something like that, where you spray them, they look like they're dead, and then they come back later. Well, then you can't go out and spray again. So it's a little more on the timing side versus, say, a Roundup bean or an Enlist bean or Liberty bean, where you got more of a window to get them. On the non-GMO, we want to get them when they're real small. Get them when they're real small, wipe them out. You know, and then I've also had guys tell me, because I use, you know, I cultivate my beans. They say, oh, by cultivating beans, you know, you're making some more seed, you know, you're regerminating or this or that. But like I say, when they're small, you go through there a couple times, wipe them out. There's no better chemical than, I always say, than iron. Go through it, take them out. You know they're out, they're dead. Everyone's going to have different pricing on their chemicals. Some are going to say, oh, you don't want to use Warren Ultra, you're going to want to use Flex Star, you're not going to want to use that. Depends on your chemical dealer or what they're selling, what they're getting their best pricing on. You know, but shop around. you know, if you're looking for Warren Ultra and you can find it cheaper one place or another, it's still Warren Ultra, you know. I get mine right from our local co-op. They do my spraying and stuff for me. So on the chemical side, I do all my own foliar stuff. So, but you can tank mix them together as well. I just like to go out with higher doses of water than what typical. You can go to agriguardian.com, or you can give me a call. My number's on the website. Or shoot me an email, give me a call, and you know, we can go through more in depth of what these products do, when to use them, how to use them, cost, different things like that.